Britain, France, and Germany have rejected the U.S. claim that UN sanctions relief for Iran will expire on September 20th. In a letter to the UN Security Council, the trio said any decision or action to reimpose UN sanctions will be incapable of legal effect. Three signatories to the Iran nuclear deal stressed their commitment to preserving and fully implementing the agreement. Last month, the U.S. Secretary of State announced a triggering of a mechanism under the 2015 deal, which snaps back all UN sanctions against Iran. Washington says a 30-day deadline for reimposition of sanctions expires September 20th, but 13 nations in the 15-member council say the move is legally void as Washington is no longer party to the nuclear deal. Joining us out of New York now is Danny Shaw, professor, University of New York. Hello, Danny. Always a pleasure to have you on. Hope you're doing well. Your thoughts on what the Europeans kind of message are they sending to Washington right now, Danny?
These are the three largest economies in Europe, England, France, and Germany. It shows the increasing isolation of the United States. Trump, this is out there even for imperialism. And these punishing sanctions against the Iranian people have caused untold misery. And what the international community wants, what the Iranian people want is peace, so that everybody can develop and interact economically. But we see these right-wing hardliners like Pompeo, like Trump, like Pence, who continue to ratchet up threats now against Belarus as well, against Venezuela and Iran, and any country that continues to have any type of economic sovereignty in the world outside the U.S.'s sphere of influence.
And Danny, these are U.S. allies, to say the least, so why not take the U.S. Side on this thing?
Yeah, that's one of the big questions. It'll be interesting to see if there's a Biden presidency in the next few weeks, if things will shift. But there's really no reason to have confidence in the Democrats either. They've continued to promise more sanctions and blockades and war. One of the ironies, of course, was that Hillary Clinton promised more war against Syria and Russia, and hence why they've never forgiven Trump. According to the neoliberals, Trump was never hard enough on Syria and Russia. So what we see is the two wings of the ruling class are both hawkish. The liberals try to present themselves as somehow peace-loving, but we've seen that that's absolutely untrue. And with so many problems here at home, incredible human rights violations here at home, we see the law enforcement rounding up peaceful protesters, raiding their homes in Aurora and Denver, Colorado. Every day we see more federal troops in the streets of this country. In the words of George Jackson, fascism is upon us. So who is the U.S. to lead these quote-unquote humanitarian or human rights issues, in big quotation marks? Nobody buys that, when the U.S. has so many internal contradictions. So they continue to use this rhetoric, but it's clear to the people of the world that the contradictions internally and externally for U.S. foreign policy are intensifying every day.
Right, and Dan, before we let you go, we see the Europeans, when it came to the JCPOA, and when we saw the U.S. Unilaterally withdraw from it back in May of 2018, we didn't see the Europeans do much as far as implementing it and allowing Tehran to gain the financial benefits it was supposed to, the sanctions relief it was supposed to get. It didn't really stand up to Washington when it mattered, but now they're not, supporting Washington's bid to try to completely scrap the accord. I mean, they're really playing the fence on this. So where do you think they truly stand when it comes to the JCPOA?
I think with the JCPOA, the largest three European economies see that they can benefit. I mean, Iran is a massive market of almost 100 million people with incredible natural resources. So I'm sure with the sinking ship of Trump and U.S. fascism, these three massive European economies have their own self-interests and don't want to be isolated like the U.S. And in terms of all of these inspectors, I mean, what an incredible contradiction. Where are the UN and international inspectors to come inspect the some 6,000 nuclear warheads that the U.S. has? many of which are in Germany and Belgium and other occupied countries where parliament and a mass movement opposes those nuclear warheads. So the U.S. is so rife with contradictions for them to say that the International Criminal Court is the rogue when in fact it's U.S. imperialism that's the most massive rogue nation in the history of the world.
All right, bud, stay safe. Thanks for joining us with your input on that. Out of New York, Mr. Danny Shaw, professor at City University of New York.